Pond is a pond approximately 250 feet by 500 feet, surrounded by housing development on the west side of Stoughton, Wisconsin. The pond itself has only been surrounded by development recently for about the past 20 years, and for the better part of the last century has been primarily surrounded by farmland. Although the pond has been surrounded by residential zoning now, the pond itself remains a sanctuary for wildlife. With the new development of apartments and duplexes, Paradise Pond has been the recipient of water drainage from the surrounding neighborhood. Two drain pipes, one on the south side of the pond and one on the west side, do not have a steady flow of water from them in fall. The large pipes, about 4 feet in diameter, enter just above the pond and are slightly filtered by large rocks that are about a foot in diameter before the water reaches the west of the pond. The drain pipes, however, do not prevent growth of vegetation or discourage animal wildlife. Although the pond does not contain any fish, there are many other animals in the area. The pond is easily accessible by city sidewalk on the south side and a gravel path that connects to a park along the western 500-foot stretch. The area within 5 feet of the gravel and the sidewalk is routinely trimmed by the city. However, the entire grassy stretch into the water is approximately 15 to 20 feet. The grass grows taller as it approaches the water down into the pond, where the plants grow as a hydrophytic plant community. Through testing, the pond water itself shows moderate levels of life support. In a small bottle, a sample of pond water has a light green, mossy-colored tint. After allowing the sample to settle, the water keeps a slight green tint. However, a green sediment will settle on the bottom of the bottle. Testing proved the water to have a slightly alkaline pH of about 8 and rather low levels of phosphorus and nitrate. The water also tested positive for active bacteria. Throughout the summer and into September, the area supports wildflowers and nests for bees. The area is covered with plants that would attract bees, also making the area difficult to explore in early fall without fear of being stung. One of the most common flowering plants in the area sports a purplish-colored flower that is commonly known as the red clover. The clover is not native to North America, but the edible plant assists with nitrogen fixation, which leads to better soil quality in the area. The plant shows purplish-colored petals starting in late summer and lasts well into October around the pond, with the flower populating at a density of about 1 or 2 plants for every square foot of unmowed grass. Another plant that is not as densely populated as the red clover is the oxeye daisy. This white radial flower was only found about every 5 to 10 feet and was not around the entire perimeter of the pond. In general, the oxeye daisy grew closer to the path and was not found at all growing within a few feet of the water. A particular flower that is found growing closer to the pond in the wet soil is the flat-topped white aster. This flower includes a strong, skinny stem that branches out to hold a bundle of white flowers at the top. The petals are radial from the small yellow center, and the flowers themselves are slightly smaller than the oxeye daisy. These are commonly found blooming in the late summer and fall, however, are not seen in this area after the temperature reaches colder than a steady 50 degrees Fahrenheit, disappearing about mid-October. A flower that was a rare occurrence on the west side of the pond was the Gaillardia pulchella. Only a few of these flowers were seen about 5 feet from the gravel path. They were short, not taller than the surrounding vegetation, and was no taller than a half foot. The single, sturdy green stem held 1 flower. The flower, about the size of a small adult fish, started as a red-brown interior and then alternating petals. The petals start as a dark red, almost maroon interior. However, the color changes to a bright yellow just at the tip of the petal. This flower seems to be a non-native species and was either planted on purpose or by someone or possibly escaped from a nearby garden, since one of the backyards facing the gravel path contained a home garden. A common plant that did not show a flower but is not a grass is the common milkweed. This plant was not as abundant as the red clover, however was noticeable and prominent because it stood taller than most of the surrounding grasses. The dark muted green of the plant shows a tall stalk and broad leaves that widely encircle the plant in stages of 4. The common grass extending into the pond grew only about a foot high. The grass itself in fall shows a fuzzy, rod-shaped tip and a long, skinny stalk. Foxtail millet is the dominant plant for the entire length of the pond. The trees along the gravel path are young, only about 10 feet, and were purposely planted by the city when the gravel path was put in. The rest of the pond does not have naturally occurring trees and does have naturally occurring trees in a heavily wooded area to the north of the pond. In the middle of the pond are two long dead trees, one of them standing taller than most of the houses in the area. The larger tree in particular shows that most of its bark has been stripped where the tree is closer to the water level, and although it still has quite a few of its branches, does not show sign of any leaves. The wooded area to the north of the pond is part of the park that the gravel path leads to, and consists of a cluster of deciduous trees about as wide as the pond, 250 feet. The trees extended at least another few hundred feet into the park. The area inside the woods did not show signs of being trimmed by the city. However, there was not much wildlife in the woods other than a few rabbits that were more interested in the backyard of the garden. A creature that in particular liked the tall grass is the blue-legged grasshopper. Grasshoppers have certain identifying factors such as the formation of the pronotum, the number of sulci, the number of the antennae, and the colors or marks on the grasshopper. The grasshopper at Paradise Pond had 3 sulci in the pronotum. This means there is a section that connects the head of the grasshopper to the body, and this section is split into smaller sections by 3 grooves. The antenna could either be ensiform or filiform, the former meaning the antennae bulges in the middle, and the latter meaning the antennae remains straight and narrow through the tip. The grasshoppers at Paradise Pond showed a filiform design. They also are a light and dark gray design with light and dark gray stripes on their legs and a reddish tint on the inside of the hind femur. The grasshoppers were found at the pond through fall, including into late October, early November. When visiting later in the season, they stay in the grass closer to the water, and approaching close to the pond disturbs the surrounding grasshoppers. This is identified by the sound of insects suddenly hopping in the tall grass, as a good number of them jump away from the intruder. For the fall migration, the pond daily attracts birds. In earlier fall, there will be anywhere from 10 to 20 birds, mainly geese and a few ducks. In earlier fall, one of the most distinctive sounding birds is the common muirhen. Walking along the gravel path, a distinct noise, almost like a witch's cackle, permeates the air. Since it is fall, the sound could be someone's obnoxious Halloween decoration. However, when the sound is repeated and answered across the pond, it is obvious that an animal is making the sound. The common muirhen was not visually identified, only verified by extensive research on bird calls because the sound was so distinct. This bird certainly adds to the character of the pond in early fall. Only one great egret was found during mid-fall. Traveling alone, it swooped down in an impressive broad wingspan and stopped in the southern part of the pond, standing very still to observe its surroundings. A great egret will eat fish, however, since there were no fish in the pond, it would have to substitute insects such as the grasshoppers for its diet. Ducks are also found at the pond throughout fall. There is an average of 1 duck for every 10 geese. The ducks mainly are found in pairs or a few females. Known around Wisconsin as mallards, the birds stop in the pond on their way south of the border, flying to Mexico or the Caribbean during winter. The shallow, open water community of the marsh is excellent for migrating birds because the pond is consistently around year after year to promote a reliable stop for migrating. The pond also supports a hydrophytic plant community where the short grasses live partially in the water as the land slopes down underneath the surface and the water level varies. Emergent plants are obvious, extending out about 3 to 6 feet from the shore of the pond. Most of the ducks remained within this area to feed on the submerged plants and other possible organisms, such as invertebrates under the surface. Although ducks are omnivores, they rely more on plant life for sustenance during migration, making Paradise Pond an ideal location for a stop. The birds most commonly found at the pond were geese. During early fall, it would be common to see anywhere from 5 to 20 geese at any given time. As the season progressed, so did the number of geese. In early fall, there could be as many as nearly 100 geese in the entire pond. Although sources Canada goose does not need to migrate. The overwhelming amount of geese in the pond in late fall indicate that many do. Not all of the northern birds migrate far because of changes in farming practices that waste more grain, that makes waste grain more available in fall and winter, as well as changes in hunting pressure and weather. That's from All About Birds on the Canada Goose. Canada geese come in 4 different sizes and choose to mate with their geese of similar size in a practice known as assortative mating. All of the geese found at the pond show evidence of this practice, as all of the individual groups of geese were of similar size. Because of the size of the pond and depth perception, it was impossible to compare whether a group of 15 or so geese at the southwestern edge was different from a group of geese at the northeastern edge, but they did appear all in groups to be of similar size. During late fall, many of the geese exhibited a strange habit of lifting up from the water and flapping their wings 3 or 4 times, then settling back into the water and ending the ritual by wiggling their tail. This action is comparable to a dog or cat shaking water out of its fur, so the action of the geese is presumably for similar reasons, to shake water out of their feathers. Geese follow a vegetarian diet, and since many geese eat seeds and grasses, the pond is a prime spot for feeding. Many of the geese would congregate not on the water, but on the edge of the pond, sitting in the grass. The west side of Stoughton has been the object of residential and commercial development since it is in the side of town closest to the capital, Madison. For most of the past century, Stoughton had slowly developed closer and closer to Paradise Pond, eventually overtaking the old farmhouse in place of development for a Walmart. Because of the drain pipes, the pond is not thought of by local residents for its aesthetic value, but is categorized in the minds of the locals as a drainage ditch. This is an unfair assessment of the area, since the pond has been a pond long before the residents moved in, and the drainage pipes are due to the residents and cannot be any fault of the pond itself. Since the area does support wildlife and has been established as part of the migration for many birds, it should be in the public's interest to realize the true value of the location.